Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for Football Fridays at the EC. We hope you're having a good time getting ready to watch the Irish beat North Carolina tomorrow. And we're thrilled that you could be here for our first ever Football Fridays edition of Catching Up With, our online learning series, where we interview interesting and notable Notre Dame alums. And we've got a true Notre Dame legend with us here today. He's a national champion, a Super Bowl champion, a proud member of the class of 1969. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Fling himself, give it up for Terry Hanratty.
Thank you, thank you.
Terry, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
For those of you in the audience, you're going to have a chance to submit your own questions for Terry. We've got Josh Stowe from the Alumni Association over here at the table to my left. You can come over here and submit some questions to him. He's going to pass them through on the computer to us over here on the iPad. All right, Terry, so we're going to get to all your exploits on the field at Notre Dame, but we like on Catching Up With, we like to start off at the beginning. So where did you grow up?
I grew up about 30 miles north of Pittsburgh, a town called Butler, Pennsylvania.
What do they put in the water out in western Pennsylvania that produces so many great quarterbacks?
You know, it's an interesting thing when you look at the line of quarterbacks that have come from that area. But I think at the time, back in the time, there was such an emphasis on football, and everybody played at a very high level. And you need a quarterback for every team. So everybody, you know, they produce a lot of good guys.
And so growing up, you're in Pitt country, you're in Penn State country. Why'd you decide to come to Notre Dame?
Actually, my first choice, and I thought I almost committed to, was Michigan State. I could have been either side of that 10-10 tie. But I met Era, and it was all over. You know, we had lunch in Pittsburgh, and we had talked for about 2 hours, and he was just so true and so honest that I went home and told my mother I'm going to Notre Dame.
And so obviously the Era's first year, 64, Notre Dame had a tremendous year. Then you come in 65, and freshmen were ineligible to play at the time. And, you know, in 65, Notre Dame's offense struggled a little bit, especially struggled to pass the ball. Was it hard for you, not able to play as a freshman, watching from the sidelines when Notre Dame was struggling to pass?
Well, as freshmen, you weren't allowed to play, and you couldn't stand on the sidelines. So we're up in the stands with the student section. And when you see any team play a 9-man line, you're just chomping at the bit to get in there because, you know, you can't do that. We had such a great team that year that I would have loved to have played there.
And so you entered, you know, going into the 66 season, you were in a quarterback competition. When did Era tell you, when did you find out you were going to be the starter?
Well, it pretty much happened in spring ball.
Okay.
And, you know, you look back at these kids today where if one quarterback commits to Notre Dame, then the other guy goes to Alabama or one guy goes over here. But my freshman class, we had 4 quarterbacks. Myself, Coley O'Brien, Bob Belden, and Mike Franger from Elkhart. And everybody was all state.
Yeah.
But no one was concerned about the competition. We knew that we were going to a major school. There's going to be a lot of competition, and competition brings the best out of everybody.
When you're getting ready for your first game there, your sophomore year against Purdue, Purdue obviously had Bob Greasy, a senior, you know, an All-American. How nervous were you going into that game?
Well, we'll put it this way. We used to say across the lake at Moreau Seminary, and you have a night, they'd show you some kind of John Wayne movie the night before to try to get you all hyped up. And then we go to the dining hall and have breakfast. And I never had steak in my life for breakfast. And I didn't know that anybody was watching me. But I went through the line, and I got a steak, I got the baked potato, put the sour cream, put the butter, put the eggs, put the toast. And I'm sitting there, you know, I'm in awe that I'm eating this kind of steak. And little did I know until after the game when everybody's telling the reporters, you should see what he had for breakfast. And I said, man, I never had food like this before. I ate the food and played the game. But I can actually say I was never nervous before any game in my life.
Really?
I was taught at an early age, you work like hell the whole week. And whatever happens on Saturday or Sunday, it's going to happen.
Well, it was obviously quite a game, your first game. You threw for over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and the 2 touchdowns went to 3 touchdowns, but 2 touchdowns to your pal Jim Seymour.
No, Jimmy caught them all.
Jim Seymour. He caught all 3.
Jimmy caught all 3.
And he had, I think, 276 yards receiving, still a Notre Dame record.
It's still a Notre Dame record, and back in the day, if you threw the ball 15, 18 times, you were a real passing team. You know, nowadays these kids do that in the first quarter. So, you know, we had a lot of fun that day.
And what was the, you know, you're both sophomores, is your first game. What was the immediate chemistry? Where did that come from, the chemistry between you and Jim Seymour?
Well, those of you old enough to remember the old field house. There we go. There's a few of us. But we used to go into the field house, and, they had those big beams up there. And Jimmy and I work all winter. We'd throw it over 2 beams for a 40-yard throw, throw over 3 beams for about a 60-yard throw. So, we would work out, and we had a lot of body motions that I knew when he was going to break, he knew when I was going to throw the ball.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of work in that old field house there.
And what made him such a special player, Jim Seymour?
Well, at that time, he was a freak of nature. He was 6'4", 215, and he was a wide receiver.
Yeah.
That's usually tight end, and he was fat. He was a hurdle champion in Michigan, his senior in high school, and he just had the speed and the size to get away from guys. And I'd throw the ball up in the air a lot of times.
Yeah.
And he'd go get it.
And you guys ended up with one of the best pair of nicknames in, I'd say, Notre Dame football history with Mr. Fling and Mr. Kling. Where did that come from?
Roger Valdesari. He came up with a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And Fling and Kling, they were baby bombers, all that good stuff.
So the team obviously, had a tremendous year that year. The offense, as you said, was prodigious for the time with you and Seymour kind of leading the way. And the defense, I think, allowed something like 24 points the entire season. Have you seen a Notre Dame defense better than that 66 squad?
Well, you go back and, obviously the quarterback gets all the glory and all the abuse, that type. You hear that all the time. But I had a great offensive line. I had Nick Eddy and Rocky Blyer and Bobby Glaggio in the backfield. And it was all senior team. We had a defense that gave up under 3 points a game. It's tough to lose when, team's not getting 3 points a game. But they got us the ball 50-yard line, 40-yard line. And, that was such a great chemistry of both special teams. And John Ray was a great defensive coach. And Aaron and Tom Pagner were great offensive minds. And, it worked really well. And I don't think, and, the 10-10 tie, I've said many times, I don't think there's 2 better teams to play each other still. Because you look on both sides of the field, they're great Hall of Famers and first-round picks and All-Americans and all that stuff.
You got hurt, I think, on the second drive of the game in that Michigan State game that you're referencing, the game of the century there. What was it? How frustrating was it for you having to watch and not be able to be in there with the teammates in such a huge game?
Well, it was frustrating. I mean, that's the game. Those are the kind of games you look for.
Yeah.
And it was strange because a play came in, it was first down, and the running back brought a play in, and he said, quarterback draw. We haven't run this thing in 4 weeks. What's going on? So I run it, and the mass of green around me, then Bubba sort of laid, put the finishing touches on it and separated my shoulder. And then the next play, it felt a little funny. So we ran a play, then we threw a pass to the left, and I tried to lift my arm up, and that's when it really grabbed, and I threw the ball out of bounds. And I came to the sidelines, and Eric says, what the hell did you run that quarterback draw for? I said, well, you sent it in. He said, no, I sent a halfback draw. I don't know who that guy was. But he ended my career there, that season.
You bring up Aaron, obviously such a legend around here. What was it like playing for him?
The most remarkable person I've ever met. Next to my father, he's the single biggest male influence in my life. And he just, he wanted you, obviously, to succeed on the field. But if you cut a class, if you missed this or you missed that, boy, you got called into that office, and I was called one time. And that's the only time you want to do that, because Era always knew about the 40-year commitment after the 4 years here.
Do you still get to see him a lot? You're around South Bend a lot with your son being on the team now.
Every time I stay in between weeks, I have lunch with Era, and then I go see Father Hesburgh for a couple hours, and see the people that on the crazy football weekends that you really can't get to see.
So you obviously the team won the national title in '66. That must have been just an incredible change going for you. I think you were 18 years old at the beginning of your sophomore year. Young for your age. You go from an unknown. You're on the cover of Time magazine, I think, a month into the season, and then national champions. It must have been a whirlwind experience. What was that first season like?
Well, you go back to the Purdue game, and obviously Jimmy and I felt pretty good after the game. And, a little celebration, not much. And then Sunday night you'd go to the dining hall and we talk about the game, then he put the film on for the Purdue game so we could analyze it. And there was more negative about me. Footwork, this and that. You didn't carry out your fake. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. He and I walked out of the thing when you had a really bad game. But then it got to you, we're two 18-year-olds. You got a lot of guys around you that helped you do that. So this is a team. And from then on, he set it straight real quick.
Yeah. You obviously had an incredible career then over your next 2 years. You finished all 3 seasons you played in the top 10 of the Heisman voting. Basically rewrote the record book for quarterbacks at Notre Dame. When you look back on your football career, what's your fondest memory?
I think just playing in that stadium. It's to my first game to my last game, when you come out of that tunnel, you still have the same chill. The fans are phenomenal. We only had 60,000 back then. They still sound as loud as 80 today. But it was, and being able to play with era and having the 40-year commitment go very well of what this school really does for you.
And are you still?
And we were around, when Father Hesburgh was, he'd be out of practice every day. We knew him as Father Ted and Father Ned. We had no clue in the world that he was such a powerful person, because he was just like your parish priest. We always knew him, and you come in the locker room, and it's a neat place to be.
Definitely. Are you still in touch with a lot of your former teammates? Who are the guys you talk to now from those teams?
Well, I see Ron Dushty, Bob Gladio, John Liam, and Swatlin, and Gedeke, and we're still a very, very tight group.
So you graduate from Notre Dame in 1969 and go into the NFL draft, and you get drafted. How excited were you to be drafted by your hometown team there, the Pittsburgh Steelers, return to the banks of the Three Rivers?
You mean that team that hadn't won in 40 years?
Yeah.
Well, I can actually say I got hit more times my rookie year than I did 3 years out here.
Yeah.
But then, no, it was great to go back, and I feel so fortunate in my football career to have played at Notre Dame for era and to play with the Steelers with Art Rooney. I mean, they're just two class individuals and institutions and the whole Rooney family. I mean, it's really neat. I've been blessed.
And what was it like playing for Chuck Noll, another Hall of Famer there?
Chuck was a great. You never heard him swear. You never heard him yell. He gave you that look, and you knew what the look meant. And at that time, quarterbacks, Terry and I, and then Joe Gillum come in. And, we call our own plays. We had the first 3 plays were scripted. Then from then on, you studied so much film, and you studied so much with Chuck, and you were an extension of the head coach's arm. He knew what we wanted to do on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 6, first and goal, whatever. And he let us grow as people and let us grow as quarterbacks and let you make mistakes, then you would correct the mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, you started for a year or so there, and then that other Terry came along, and you were a backup and won some Super Bowl rings. What was it like for you? Was that hard? I imagine the first time in your career being a backup quarterback. Was that a difficult transition for you?
Well, life is timing. I think I had great timing coming to Notre Dame. There wasn't a real established veteran quarterback, so you got in there. And, Terry's a Hall of Fame quarterback. There's no doubt he did a great job with the Steelers. And, it's life. There are bumps in every road you travel. So you have to be able to adjust to that.
So after you finished up in the NFL, you went into business. What made you decide to become a stock trader? Why'd you want to do that?
Well, I was always an investor when I was playing, buying stocks here and playing around with the market. Then I really became interested, and I went to New York, and I was an institutional stock trader, which, you do the big block trading. And I did that for 30 years. Yeah. And I retired from my 5 o'clock wake up about 5 years ago, so now I get up a normal time of day. So it was fun. It was very rewarding and a lot of fun to do, and I met a lot of great people.
Your son Connor is a senior guard on the team this year. When he was being recruited and was obviously a very highly rated recruit, did he have a choice in the matter? Could he have gone wherever he wanted, or were you really steering him towards Notre Dame?
No, I did not steer him at all. In fact, I told him, I said, I don't know if Notre Dame's for you. Mm-hmm. You have to feel it. You have to feel the campus. You have to feel the coaching staff. I said, Eric Parsegian is no longer the coach. Father Hesburgh is no longer the president. Notre Dame has changed. So we took, on my dime, the trip around the country, the teams that offered him, and I said, I want you to make this decision because it's 4 years of your life, not mine. I don't have to go to school anymore. Yeah. So I want you to be comfortable. Then his senior year, spring game, and he sort of surprised me. We came out for the spring game. He said, Dad, I want to commit this weekend. Oh, okay. Obviously I'm not going to fight him. But he met a lot of great people, a lot of great coaches at a lot of great schools. Yeah. And, he told me afterwards that he put Notre Dame up here and basically let everybody shoot at it. And what's it like for you now, a former superstar here on the field at Notre Dame, watching your son, play in that very same stadium that you said is sort of your fondest memory? Well, I have to admit, when he was a freshman and he walked out and ran out on that field for the first time, there was a tear in my eye. Yeah. It was neat to watch. Yeah. The team this year is obviously off to a fabulous start.
What has impressed you most about the way they've been playing?
I think you got to really go to the defensive side. I think that was remarkable. And I think Brian VanGorder he coached under what's the name, Ryan?
Rex Ryan.
Rex Ryan. And as much as you may not like Rex as a head coach, the Ryan family knows defense.
Yeah.
And if you spend time with him and you're a sponge, you're going to come up with some stuff that people have never seen in their life. Because if you look at Tom Brady, who's supposed to be one of the cerebral quarterbacks in the NFL, he has his worst games. They may beat him, but he has the worst games against Rex. Because Rex, he's got a lot of stuff going for him. And I think Brian has a lot of young talent. I think that may have surprised me more than anything, how the young freshmen are really, really contributing.
Yeah. And obviously Everett Golson's having a tremendous year. As a guy who knows a thing or two about throwing the ball, what have you seen? How has he changed? What's the biggest improvement from the 2012 version of Everett Golson to what we're seeing out there now?
Well, he's just matured. I don't think that what he did in 2012, I mean, he was a freshman. So you got to allow them to grow. You got to allow them to make mistakes. You're lucky you had Tommy Reese in there that came in and bailed him out in a couple games.
Yeah.
But Everett, you knew when you saw the basic way he played the game and the strength of his arm and his vision, he's got it all. I mean, the kid is very talented. And the way, I tell you, he can throw off balance and he put a zip on the ball, and it's fun to watch.
So do you have a prediction for us for the score tomorrow against North Carolina?
We will win. I'm not a betting man.
Go around. So I think now we've got some time for questions from the audience. We're actually gonna take some mics out into the audience. So if you've got a question for Terry here, raise your hand, and we've got a couple people from the Alumni Association coming around with some mics. Come on.
Well, everybody's bashful.
Nobody's got questions. Come on. Oh, we got one right
there
here.
We go.
Right up.
How was it playing with Rocky Blyer?
Well, I got the opportunity to play with Rocky in college and pros. And when he came back from Vietnam, he stayed with my family and I for a few months. And we would work out together. And it got to the point where I tell Rocky every day, I said, "You're crazy." He would have the worst limp in the world because the one leg was blown up. And the doctor probably said, "You're going to have trouble walking, you'll never run, obviously you're never going to play in the NFL." And the Rooney said, they were wonderful. They paid for everything. They offered to send Rocky to law school. And I told him, I said, "Rocky, I said, why are you killing yourself like this?" He says, "Go to law school. You have a good life. Live in Pittsburgh. Everybody knows you. Everybody loves you." But he was bound and determined. And if you would have told me back then that he was going to rush for 1,000 yards in the NFL when 1,000 yards really meant something, I would have lost everything I own. It was a great honor. Great guy.
Terry, do you recall your statistics?
Get too close.
You recall your statistics tutor at Notre Dame?
Is it
His
you?
name George Carr. Yeah.
George, how you doing, man? Good to see you. Yeah, I flunked that course.
No, you didn't. Dr. Kerm, I know you remember.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Terry. I'm Dave Heskin from the class of '69. What's the biggest difference you see between football when you played and today? College football.
College football as a whole, not just Notre Dame, it's all over. We really had fun back then. We didn't have this, once we weren't allowed to play bowl games. So once the final game was over, you were free till spring. I think we worked out one day a week. And we got to really mix with the student body, and we went to all these basketball games, and, we supported our, fellow student athletes. And nowadays, Connor's been to one basketball game here. And I said, "Why don't you go to the games?" He said, "Dad, we don't get out of the group till about 7:30. Game starts at 7. I got 2 hours of homework. There's just no time." And that's the way it is nationwide. It's just not here. I mean, they put so much pressure. And we used to have, now all student athletes, scholarships have to go to summer school. It's a must. Back in my day, you were invited to get the GPA up, and I got invited a couple summers. But it was so much fun because we got up to the dunes. We'd have a class on Friday, and the Wednesday the professor would say, "I want to play golf on Friday. Why don't we cancel?" We were up Thursday night. We were up at the dunes. We each had $10 in our pocket, no place to stay, but we always found someplace. But I think the much time that these kids have to put in now, I think that's the biggest difference. And I wish they could get a bigger, really taste of the university, of the student life and whatnot. But, they're so, that Goog, man, that's their life over there.
Thank you. Got any more questions from the audience?
Hi, I'm Tom Walworth, class of 77. Tell us, you were here before women were on campus. Tell us about the advent of women at Notre Dame.
I was all for it. I have 2 daughters graduate from here. I was all for it. Now, you old-timers like me, give them a break. I mean, everybody went crazy when they got to put artificial turf in there. This is a different life we're in now. These kids, they all played high school on that turf. We all grew up in grass and mud and, all that sloppy you see at the games in the 50s and 60s, whatever. But, these kids, there's the slightest change I see on all these blogs. Everybody goes crazy. That's tradition, that's tradition. No, it doesn't go back that far. Just like the walk they have now, which is lovely. Our walk used to be, I lived in Walsh, and I called Dushni and Glasgow over and saw her. I said, you ready to go over to the stadium? So the 3 of us would meet outside and we walk over. It was, with no band playing, no one cheering. We walk over, get dressed, and play the game. So these things, let these kids have fun. Let them have their Notre Dame. We had our Notre Dame, and we can all love it.
Got some more questions here?
Favorite bar?
We got one right up in front. This handsome gentleman.
I heard that one.
You said you never got nervous when you played games. I was wondering if you, watching your son play in like high school and college, if that ever gets your nerves up.
I love seeing my son on the field, but I am such a wreck because I don't see the game. My eyes are just peered on 65 at guard. And even in high school, where he obviously huge and dominated, I get to the stadium in high school. I'd be the first guy there. I always sat in the 40-yard line, always have my cup of Starbucks, get ready for the game an hour beforehand. They're not ticket takers aren't even there yet, but I'm sitting there. No, it's total different. I mean, I never bothered me. You have no control. Back then, I studied really hard. I watched a lot of films. We had a lot of meetings, good practice. Then whatever happened. But now, nothing.
Got one over here for you.
Would you agree with Ayer's decision to take a knee versus Michigan State? Or would you have rather hoisted it down?
He didn't take a knee. Everybody forgets that Michigan State kicked the ball to us from the 50-yard line and put us backed up. Coley was diabetic. They just found out. He's weak as hell. We tried to throw on first down. We got sacked. We ran a draw. Nothing. The worst thing we could do was to punt the ball. You had to run the clock out. It's as easy as that. Why didn't Duffy run the ball or try to get the first down? He had like 3rd or 4th and 6 or something like that from the 50. If you make a mistake, you still have a lot of room behind you. We make a mistake down our own end zone, we lose the game. Plus, had there been a winner or loser, no one would ever be talking about that game. I'm still alive. Every Michigan State game, I get a call from the Michigan radio station. And I keep saying, my God, it's been 45 years. Haven't you forgot about this thing yet?
Plus, we got the national championship out of it, so it all worked out.
That's the funny part, because I went up to watch Notre Dame at Michigan Stadium, was it 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And they have these banners. I'm going, 1966, national champions. Who was that? No. Scratch that out.
You got any more questions from the crowd here?
Not really a question, Terry, but we have a lot of 69ers here and enjoyed the time when you were here with you, and you gave us a lot of great memories and really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for the support. It was, like I said earlier, there's nothing better than in that stadium.
Well, we got one question that came in here to us, which was, who's the best player you ever played against? How about in college and pro?
Wow. I mean, when you stretch to the best player that I ever played with was Joe Green. Mm-hmm. Against Butkus. Yeah, I mean, there were so many great ones. In college, there were a lot of great ones. But once you get to the pros, I mean, it's totally, you get the creme de la creme of every school.
Right.
So it's hard to tell. There's some great defensive backs.
And what is, you told us what your favorite football memory was earlier. What's your favorite thing about Notre Dame?
I think just coming back here and seeing the support that everybody gives through the years. And it's truly, because I've talked to him when I was with the Steelers. I talked to guys that went to Penn State, went to Alabama, whatever. And they never go back to their school. I said, really? I said, when I get out of here, I want to go back a lot. And, they just don't have the connection. Back then they had a lot of athletic dorms throughout the country. Notre Dame never had one, because you were spread throughout the campus, which is the way it should be. But they never had any connection to the student body. They lived in the athletic dorm and they worked in the field. So it's just the whole school. I mean, it's so nice. It was very nice, except for last Saturday's weather.
Yeah.
It's very nice to come back.
Well, we're about out of time here. We got to let Terry go pick up his son Connor. Terry, thank you so much for joining us today. I know the class of '69 and everybody else who's here got a real thrill, and we love having you.
69, here we go.
Thanks for being here.